Jack Kirby 101, as I was saying, and this year we're moving into...
That's the number of comics he drew in a week.
It does seem like that. 100 months. This year we're talking a little about Jack Kirby, the King's most powerful tales. And by the way, I'm not going to try to drag you guys back to this panel every year, but I have ideas for at least 2 more years worth of Kirby different themed panels.
Well, good luck with that. You know how old we are?
We might be here next year, we might not.
You know, you never know.
It's a crapshoot.
But we're coming up, to plug for tomorrow's publishing, we're coming up on 100 issues of the Jack Kirby collection. Somebody just said to me the other day that it is amazing that every issue there's still stuff to talk about, things you haven't seen before, and the guy drew a lot of stuff. So anyway, but we're going to start with Walter, because as I said, he has to run away. So to introduce, first of all, we've got from the left side, Walter Simonson. Who has drawn a character or two that was, originally developed by Jack Kirby and his partners.
That's a low bar.
All of us have written new drawing Jack Kirby.
That's right.
Milgrom, who I'm delighted to have here. And Ron Marz, who is also So we're going to just jump right in here with some Thor stuff. I just put together a fairly random assortment of fabulous images, and they're of my choosing because I think Walt, you've talked about before the Tales of Asgard stories being
Probably my wife.
That's not me, right?
No, that's me.
No.
the Tales of
Give me 1 second.
Okay. There will be a brief
Or should I?
intermission.
Jude, I'm on a panel. I can't talk. Goodbye.
Wow. Nicely done.
Possibly the fastest cell phone call ever.
If I need to get off, I get off.
That's right.
Yeah.
I think you've talked before about the Tales of Asgard stories, and I just loved how powerful they were, especially at the beginning, partly because of George Rousseau's inking. And
I'm glad to hear you say that because a lot of people hate his inking.
well,
Somebody was tearing him down online recently, and I said, no, it's great. It's raw, it's powerful. It looks like Kirby stuff from the late 40s, early 50s.
but Walter, you wanted to jump in with the story, right?
Well, I was just going to, I guess we were talking about what Jack's most powerful stories or whatever it was. So of course I was going to jump right to the new gods rather than the Thor.
But
I couldn't do
I
couldn't
jumped to
do
the new
Thor.
gods.
I will say one thing about the Tales of Asgard. The first one, and maybe the first two, because I have to go back and look, are actually more or less retellings of the actual Norse myths, which is pretty cool. So they have the Well of Milgrom or whatever it is, the Surtur and a bunch of stuff like that they were just talking about the myths. And then a few issues in, didn't take very long, they began to do individual stories about that were related to the Marvel Thor rather than myths, based on the myths. And they did, then there were several stories about how Thor came to lift Mjolnir, the hammer. So he was trying it out, and of course Jack didn't do anything, so he drew a great looking kid Thor who's trying to pick up the hammer, and he can lift the handle, but he can't get the head off the ground.
Same outfit.
Same outfit, yeah.
When he was 10.
I guess his mom kept reselling his clothes and making them bigger, but it was the same outfit.
We're going to have to let this out.
Yeah, really. So, and then finally there was, he still couldn't do it. There was one shot, he's pulling it up like this, he'd gotten off the ground, he couldn't get it up over his head.
Inches, yeah.
It was just, and then finally, some girl got carried off by trolls or something, I don't remember who it was. And in the haste to rescue her, Thor just grabs the hammer and roars after her and saves her without thinking. And it's not until sometime later, I don't know if it's weeks or days, where he realizes he lifted the hammer, and which was really cool. And I thought that was a really neat way to do it. That's what, and then Tales of Asgard then moved from specific stuff on Thor like that into other areas, and eventually became these fairly long stories. They had a thing called the Odin sword, which later was called the Oversword. That was invented again, Tales of Asgard. And it was what was the basis of my stories, my early stories with Thor and Surtur, really were inspired by that sword, even though by the time I was doing the book, they had destroyed it. Ralph and Mark got rid of it. Thank you. And so I just invented my own, a big sword that I could give to Surtur and have it work out. But it was inspired by that. And they had these long running stories of multiple issues, five pages at a time, with Thor having adventures. There's one where they're going to manage to, Ragnarok is coming, and the Oversword has cracks in it, and that's going to be big trouble. And they go on an adventure, and eventually they discover Loki's the bad guy. They toss Loki to the wall of sleep. I haven't read these damn stories in like 50 years. I can't remember crap I wrote last week. So, of course, I could be wrong. You guys haven't read them. I can be making it up. But basically, they toss Loki to the wall of sleep so he won't get in trouble. But then that's never referred to again in the comic book and never shows up in the continuity of the regular. I should have done that story when I was. Dang, I never thought. Well, maybe they will. So, and it became its own thing for some time. Eventually, they gave it an origin of Hogan the Grim in those series of stories. They kind of borrowed from some of the Middle Eastern tales. Genies and stuff like that. And then finally they dropped it and just made Thor the complete feature, so all 20 or 22 pages, whatever it was. Right. But they were great. What I was going to say about the New Gods is that there was well, that was it right there. That's the Glory Book.
Yeah,
Glory Book. Yes. I don't know, I'm not sure if that's my favorite Kirby story. It's hard to have one favorite Kirby story. But the Fourth World War is maybe my favorite Kirby stuff, because it's so Jack Kirby and nobody else. Frank Miller, we were office mates for a long time, years ago, and we were talking about everything. And we talked about this, and Frank's opinion about the Fourth World stuff, which you probably don't remember anymore, was that it was like, he sort of sees it as the first independent comics. They were so personal to what, even though it was a mainstream outfit,
Yeah.
he felt it was his version of independent comics. And I love it. I could go on for the entire hour of that. I'm not going to. But the Glory Book was, what is that, Jack? Issue 6 or something?
Yeah.
Can't read it from here. My eyes aren't what they were. But it was a two-part story, ended the Glory Book. It was like an Ingmar Bergman film in comics of what that was. It was cryptic, it was mysterious, it was full of strange things. At the very end, the old guy who survives, whose son has been killed in the final cataclysm, is blown away in a raft, surviving, later be picked up, and he's saying, it's over, or something like that. And I'm left to live out my life. And that was the last one. Well, okay, why not? It just felt mysterious and strange and full of Jack's energy. Maybe it was just a complete blast. I really wanted about 2 more pages of big panels on that one because it was so cool. But it was just, he just did amazing stuff. And the other thing I'll mention is an earlier issue, there's an issue where Orion fights Calabac in the city in New York.
Yeah.
And it's just this brutal fight.
Oh, that's up there.
Is that up there?
Yeah. So I put these together because I kind of feel like these are
Oh, good.
the 3-issue run that can't
So,
be.
well, that's right.
The Glory Book, the Pact, and the Death Wish.
Yeah, Pact, that's just a great story. But in the fight with Calabac at the end, he's beaten, even though he's lost his face, his bad guy face is back, and he's finally beats Calabac. And there's a good-looking woman there hanging out in her apartment. I forget how that worked out. But they're up on a high floor in New York City, and finally, and she's obviously attracted to Ryan, and finally he steps out of the balcony, and he starts screaming for Darkseid. And Darkseid, show yourself. Send me no lesser beasts like Calabac. And he's just screaming, full of Kirby energy everywhere. And she kind of goes, holy cow, what are they talking to? And Lightning, his good buddy, is right there and says, what seems to fascinate you, lady, unbridled fury, or whatever he referred to his friend. But they're just, when he's screaming on the balcony there for Darkseid to show himself, just a spectacular bit of writing and drawing all put together.
Yeah.
So, can't recommend that stuff. It's very cryptic, it's its own thing. He did something in that series that I've never seen anybody else do, which is there were 4 books, Fourth World, New Gods, Forever People, Mr. Miracle, Jimmy Olsen. And my interpretation of that is of this great war that was being fought. In the New Gods, it was the great warriors who fought the battle at the top level, the major guys who brought the war and were fighting it out. The Forever people were the children of the gods, for whom war was still a great adventure, and not, as Darkseid once said, the cold game of the butcher. And finally, you have the Mr. Miracle, who was the conscientious objector, who did not want to fight. This came out during Vietnam, so a lot of that stuff was floating around. Of course, Jack was a World War II vet. So that one was about a guy who did not want to participate and who kept being sucked back in by the forces that were around him. And then Jimmy Olsen, he treated that was really the war at the human scale. It was kind of what was going on Earth, devolved down from all this great stuff. So it was criminals and things of that sort that went on. If you've ever read, there was a science fiction writer, E.E. Smith, Doc E.E. Smith, who did Pulp, The Lensman, and he did something else, another short series. But in The Lensman, there are 6 novels. They're really pulp now. They're fun. I read them at the right age. I don't know if I could read them now. But they tell the story of this great war between these 2 races. And it starts off with some human stuff and pirates and things like this, and they all have spaceships by then. And then each one gets larger and larger, the scale gets bigger and bigger, until finally you're having this gigantic war with these 2 great races who are struggling for supremacy. And in a way, I thought that's kind of what Jack was doing in the Fourth World. And I'm really unhappy he was never able to finish. I don't know if he had to finish in mind, but I would love to have seen where that story went. But even as it is, since it didn't end completely, you have your own imagination to carry you off in the story, go where you want to go. But I thought that was just an astounding achievement to do 4 issues every 2 months in different levels and put them all together and make a picture, a great picture that gradually became apparent to you as you read the stories. I'm done.
I'm just going to mention, I think this particular, that was great, yeah. This particular slide because this is an issue of Jimmy Olsen that was given to me when I was about 8 years old. And I looked at it again recently. And it's like a 22-page story with something like 8 splash pages. 3 of them are, those collages he was doing.
Oh, the photo collages?
Unbelievable. I don't know. I could not figure out what was going on, but I'm not sure I can now. But it's just, every page is just hitting you in the head so hard. So.
It was, they were great. Yeah. I thought that was the only time I read Jimmy Olsen.
Oh,
regular basis. I mean, I read a few oddball issues here and there. Yeah. Jimmy Olsen turns into a red gorilla. Jimmy Olsen knows whatever he's doing. But those comics was like, the first issue, the Jimmy Olsen came out first, the Fourth World. I think 3 of them came out, and then maybe you guys number 1, I don't remember, but there were 3 months of Jimmy Olsen. And I was a Jack Kirby fan for the Marvel stuff, so I was really looking forward to it. I read the first issue. You guys have to help me on this. I read 1 issue, it blew my brains out. It was the Mountain of Judgment. Right. It was the Harrys. Yeah. It was the, who were the Harry, the hippies that were, in other words, the jungle, this giant jungle gym of trees.
Right. They had a habitat built.
The habitat.
Giant wood
things. And, and then it was
Lego
all,
blocks or something.
And Jimmy Olsen runs down and beats the main leader of the motorcycle gang. So now he becomes the leader of the motorcycle gang, and he's going to lead them down what was the road called? Not the thruway.
I don't know.
The speedway, something like that. Lead them down that in order to seek out, says you find the mountain of judgment and then you die. And it was like, holy God, this is what
want to seek that out.
Boy, I can't wait to find it. So,
Jimmy's going around going, I got the signal watch, don't worry.
We're coming. And then Superman zooming ahead. And then when Superman tries to interfere, one of the guys pulls out a gun and goes with some dust, and it turns out to be a gun full of kryptonite dust, so they can kind of slow Superman down for a while. So they're imagining, well, Superman's going to be here. We better have something to deal with him just in case he shows up.
I'd like to point out, by the way, that the cover on the left there is a weird combination of incredible talents. It's Jack inked by Neil Adams.
Yep.
That didn't happen very often.
There were a couple of covers.
2 or 3 covers.
Yeah.
And he managed to do a really good job, but still give it a little of that Neil Adams actual drawing.
Yeah.
Because Jack's stuff was so stylized. but
Yeah.
anyway.
But anyhow, it was just.
Just
it
real
was
quick,
fantastic.
that author E.E. Smith, was that his name?
What's that? Doc E. Doc E.
Doc E.
Smith.
Smith.
Doc E.
Okay, thank you.
Smith, that's
Or
right.
was that a?
I think it was. I'm not sure he was a doctor of physics or anything.
No,
I think
Doc,
he may have been.
D.O.C.
He may have been.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Doc Smith, yeah.
But yeah, the Lensman series
Lensman.
on the
I
Skyline.
bought those and never read them.
I read them. They were pretty
I'll
amazing.
bet.
But again, you may have had to be the right age to actually.
I think,
I
yeah.
probably bought them at the right age, but,
Yeah.
and I don't know where they are now, so.
But, and they wrote the Skylark series, which is shorter, not quite as
Skylark,
good.
yeah, I
series,
read that one too.
but it's good, so. All right, guys, I'm out. Thank you.
Yeah, no,
Thanks very much. Raise your hand, Brett. This guy,
Hey,
Brett,
Brett.
raise your hand. That guy right there.
Hey Brad, how you been?
Hey Al, great to see you. I'm sorry you lost your delicate sense of humor though.
Or as my sister-in-law
You know,
said,
Brad,
as my sister-in-law said, the funniest man in comics. So,
I'll go with you. The nicest guy in
I
comics.
just want you to know, Brad,
Nicest man in
that
comics.
sarcasm is the deepest chasm of them all.
all right, guys.
Thanks.
Have fun. These guys are good. Enjoy.
Take care.
So Al, why don't you go back to, nope.
I'll catch you.
Likewise, you look good. Yeah, I really do.
Yeah, artificial knees now.
Oh, I had a hip replacement.
Well, there we go.
This is old guy conversation.
It's just the usual organ recital, everybody.
You guys got to catch hard. I got all original parts. What the hell?
Yeah, God bless
I got
them.
two big things.
But it's nice to know that we place a lot of good things.
They look like mine. They're doing well.
Al, let's go back to some stuff you wanted to talk about. And,
Sure.
starting with this sailor.
Yes. Well, I just thought it was funny because I love Kirby stuff. He's my all-time favorite comic book artist. It's hard to imagine that he was incredibly fast. He was incredibly good, and he generated, I'm pretty sure, more ideas and concepts and new characters than anybody in the history of comics, and probably more than 5 or 6 other guys combined, if not more than that. So, but I thought it was, for some reason, I was reading some magazine about Jack Kirby many years ago, and this keeps popping up. They show his first professional drawing job, I believe, was doing in-betweening for Popeye cartoons. And they always have a picture of Popeye doing this, and Jack Kirby would do the in-between. And I thought, well, that's ironic because people ask me, well, what got you into comics? How'd you like to draw this stuff? When I was a kid, I loved the Popeye cartoons, and I would draw him all the time. That was my first foray into drawing. My mother would have these rolls of white paper for lining the shelves in the kitchen. So instead of having to clean the shelves all the time, once the paper got dirty, she'd just throw it out. But she was good about letting me just take these things and draw all over them. And I remember doing a scene where there's about 50 different Popeyes all fighting each other. And the guy in the center, and they're flying off the page, but the guy in the center's got like a wad of spinach hanging out of his mouth. So he's the genuine article. And I thought it was funny that Jack Kirby's first foray into drawing and mine were the same character. And let's face it, Popeye is essentially a superhero. Takes his spinach and he can do. I mean, he's tough to begin with. I mean, he always gives Bluto a really good fight, but ultimately, either Bluto gets the better of him or he hits him with an anvil or something, and then Popeye has to eat his spinach, and then now he's really supercharged. I could use some of that today. Anyway, but yeah.
Al, you had mentioned some of the early Kirby comics that you read, and I
Yeah.
thought, boy, these are great examples of that Kirby power we're talking about. Look at these stories, Hulk number 3.
Yeah, I was somewhere with my mom in a strange neighborhood. I don't know what we were doing there. And there was a drugstore and I went in and they had a comic rack. And I saw this and I said, what the heck is this? There's this guy, green guy shooting through the air, and they're all in a great Kirby composition where they're all pointing at him or shooting at him, and the rocket ship is coming at him. I mean, everything is leading your eye right to the Hulk. And you know, now Marvel was doing those monster comics at the time, you know, Tales of Suspense, Journey into Mystery, Strange Tales. They had that whole line where Stan and Jack were doing the monster of the month, basically. And Ditko was doing backup stories in many of them, and Don had. And I had no interest. I would look at them and I'd go, it's monsters. You know, I was strictly a superhero guy. But this one really caught my eye on the stands, and, as kids will do, I was standing there just reading this comic, you know, while the druggist was going, this is not a library, kid. And I said, and it's number 3. So this is the Hulk, and there's already, oh, there he is trying to bust out of his prison.
Look at that.
I know, look at the length of those arms. And by the way, you know, he was big, but he wasn't like they're showing him in the movies these days, where he's like 10 feet tall or something. He was maybe 6.5 feet, 7 maybe, but bulky and you know, not like a muscle builder with every muscle defined, but just the bulk on the guy, the bulk of the Hulk. And but I had a revelation. I said, oh, this is a continuing character, and I bought it and brought it home, and I was fascinated because here's this character, and he's the strongest guy on earth, but he's rampaging and tearing stuff up, and the army's out to get him and everybody else, and in this issue, Rick Jones, his sidekick, who you guys know the story, right? Bruce Banner saved him from the gamma blast and sucked up the energy himself by mistake. So they couldn't beat the Hulk, General Ross, but they devised a plan where they would lure him into a rocket capsule, you know, and launch him into orbit so he would be off the Earth and out of everybody's hair. And you know, they enlisted Rick's help, but he didn't know they were going to try to destroy him or get rid of him. They just thought they were going to contain him or maybe try and get him to turn back into Bruce Banner. But no, they just wanted to get him off the planet. And so Rick, you know, realizing that he betrayed his buddy, went up and tried to mess with the controls. And somehow there was an electric shock that went from the control panel to the capsule in outer space. And they were both, you know, shocked by this thing. And all of a sudden, now Rick could control the Hulk. The Hulk was under his, his mental commands. And so he could then, you know, and the capsule crashed to Earth, and the Hulk got free. But Rick could now control him and make him do good things. The only problem is when Rick fell asleep, then he'd lose his control, and the Hulk would go on rampages again. So, and I just thought, what? This is wild stuff.
Now, maybe, because we're going to run short on time.
Yeah, I want to do that.
But maybe you could tell us about your interaction with Kirby when you were at Marvel in the 70s.
Okay, well, I didn't exactly interact with Jack. What happened was, they had rotating editors-in-chief. Stan did it for a long time, then Roy did it for a pretty long time. Then Len and Marv and Archie Goodwin, and, you know, it was a revolving door of editors-in-chief because it's just the worst job in the world. None of you would like that job. But anyway, ultimately, it came around to Jerry Conway, and he was working up there writing several books a month. And they said, how would you like to be editor-in-chief? And he said, that sounds great. You know, he found out different. But the bottom line, it's a thankless job, it really is. But he was there, I think, I'm not exaggerating, a month, maybe less. And he came to me one day and he said, hey Al, Kirby is, he's over at DC doing the Fourth World stuff, and it wasn't working out. They weren't selling as well as they'd hoped. There were some other shenanigans going on, but the bottom line is, Jerry says, we want, Jack's coming back, and we want him to do like a lot of covers like he did in the old days where he would do virtually the cover for every book in the Marvel line. And I said, yeah, that sounds good. He says, we want you to do cover sketches for Jack. And I said, why? Jack Kirby does not need my help, that kind of thing. And he said, no, we know he could certainly do it himself, but we'd have to ship out hundreds, if not thousands, of photocopies to the West Coast, and then he'd have to waste his time looking through all these Xeroxes to try to find the best possible cover scene. And so, and his time's too valuable, so, how would you like to do it? And I'm going, yeah, because my time. So I said, Jerry, that sounds like fun. I'd love to work with Jack Kirby, who I adore. I said, but how about this? If I do that, the covers that I do sketches for him, they're like, bond paper, 8.5 by 11 bond paper. Can I ink the pencils on those covers? And he said, yeah, sure, we like your inks too, that kind of thing. So I said, okay, good deal. So I did a number of covers for Jack. I put on my Jack Kirby hat and did the closest imitation that I could of his stuff, just to get in the right frame of mind. We did a number of covers together for the Avengers, the Defenders, Iron Man, and Ghost Rider, of all things. So, yeah. And by the way, to my shock and chagrin, he stuck very close to the sketches that I sent him. They were, I kind of thought, oh, he'll fix it, but no, he did what I had. But he's Jack Kirby. They look great. And the only downside for me was, and I got to ink them, and then at some point, when Jerry left to go work for DC, because he didn't want to be an editor-in-chief anymore, because we did. So apparently his followers, the people who followed him in the office, didn't realize I had that arrangement where I was supposed to ink those covers. So all of a sudden, I stopped getting them, so I went, oh. And I don't remember, I don't think they continue to have me do sketches after that for me either, so maybe they didn't like the results. I don't know. Bottom line is I never got any originals back. I think Jack was getting all the originals himself. And, but a few years later, when Shooter took the entire editorial staff to San Diego, the Kirbys had a table there, and they were selling originals for, easy now, $100 for a cover. And I'm at the time it probably was kind of expensive, So I don't remember what year that was exactly. So I went and I picked out all the ones that I had done, with Jack, and I said, yeah, I'm really glad I can get some of these because I inked them. And the guy at the table, who I think was, I found out later, I guess, was Jack's son, said, oh, you inked these? I said, well, yeah, actually, I inked them and I did the cover sketches for Jack also for these. He says, oh, you know what, wait right here. And he disappeared. And he came back about 10 minutes later. He says, you know what, my dad says for you, $60. And I said, I'll take as many as I can get. And I still have them. So.
Ron, maybe we can move over to you now because you've written a particular Kirby character a fair amount and wanted to talk. I was hoping you would talk about Silver Surfer 18 to start with.
Yeah, like that's a weird one because it wasn't.
Oh,
it wasn't John Buscema. It was
right
the other guy.
Yeah, 17 issues of John Buscema.
And as much as now, this was all like pre me being in the world. But
you were pre-me? I didn't know that.
Like this, but years later.
And that's a trippy cover.
Yeah, it's her cover. Herb Trimpe, who I later in life would play softball with. Herbie was right fielder, I was second baseman. Both for Marvel's team, playing on the team upstate. But I was always much more of a Kirby guy than a Buscema guy, while acknowledging that John was